Hello, I'm Dr. Ala Kamerdiner. Welcome back to Lecture 15. This is part B. We will continue talking about modeling detailed operations, and we will discuss counter sets and also counter and time-persisting statistics data module. And we haven't finished some additional changes in terms of modeling back office research. So we're gonna go ahead and do that as well. So as you know, we continue working on changing Model 5.1 into Model 5.2, Enhanced Call Center. And in terms of the back office research, let me review some of the information. So we're gonna have 4% of tech support calls that are not able to be handled during the call. And so these calls will need offline back office research. And so original call ends, and the same original talk time distribution gives up its trunk line but not counted yet as completed, and then the case sent to back office, which is outside model boundaries, and it takes exponential 60 minutes to resolve this question. And then offline research may be carried out overnight and completed on a later day. So again, the answer needs to go back to the same tech support person who took original call. And so, as you know, we introduced the attribute called tech agent index. And so we're going to be using that. And additionally, this call from the back office is going to have a higher priority than incoming calls, but still might have to wait. And then this tech support person requests a trunk line for outgoing call, and it also has higher priorities than incoming calls, but might have to queue. And then the talk is triangular with parameters 2, 4, 9 minutes. And then after that, the call is completed. And again, we need to track the number of each product type. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna introduce some entity types to be able to track the product types. So before we do some of the modeling of the back office research for tech calls, recall that we also introduced a counter set, and that counter set had counter statistics in it. And in those statistics, we want to count the number of rejected calls in each hour. So what we need to do now is modify that by introducing some changes in the record module for rejected calls, because in Model 5.1 we simply had a statistic that was a counter for rejected calls that counted all rejected calls and didn't distinguish between different hours of the same day. So what we want to do is we want to make this change where we're gonna use the counter set rejected calls that we created, and we're gonna use this expression here that will allow us to determine which statistic in that call the count will be going into. And so if you look at this, T now corresponds to the current time. If you divide it, remember that in this model we're using minutes, and so T now, or current time, is in minutes. So when we divide it by 60, we determine the number of hours that has passed. And so if it's less than 60, then it's still the first hour. So T now divided by 60 is going to be less than 1. And then we add 1. And so this function, AIint, basically allows us to decrease to the integer towards, or truncates the decimals to obtain the integer and truncate it down towards 0. So as you can see, if we truncate it, something here we're gonna have for the first hour, we're gonna have from 0 to 59 minutes, we're gonna have only a decimal number that's less than 1, and then plus 1, it's gonna be between 1 but more than 1 but less than 2, or at least 1 but less than 2. And so when we truncate it down, we're gonna get 1. So it's 1 for the first hour, then similarly you can see that it's 2 for second hour, and so on. So let's go ahead and do that in Arena. So in Arena, you can see here is my record rejected calls that I will need to modify. So I'm gonna go in, open it up to make some changes, and as I told you, it's still just like it was in model 5.1, so it counts into this counter statistic. So I want to make the change here. So instead, it's gonna I'm gonna use here a different information. So I'm gonna have still as a count and value 1, but I'm going to record it into a set. And so as soon as I click on record into set, it now allows me to also set up the set index. So I'm going to change it here. I'm going to set it as rejected calls. This is my counter set, and then my set index is going to be given by an expression. So I'm going to go ahead here, click. So again, I'm just right-clicking on it, and then build expression. And then what I want to do is use this mathematical function that truncates it down to 0. So I'm going to scroll down to find math functions, click on it, and then it's going to be we can round it to the or truncate it down to the round it to the nearest integer, or truncate it down to the nearest integer. Actually, round could actually possibly, if we used round, it could potentially go right. If we have, say, 45 minutes, then it would truncate, it would actually round it to 2, so we don't want to do that. Instead, we're using truncate, and then we also need an expression here. So I'm gonna highlight 1, and my expression is gonna be, I want t now, but I also want it inside this additional, so maybe I'll just get rid of 1, and then plus 1, or I could have clicked here, and that also produces plus 1. And then inside, I want current time in the system. So this is my simulation variables, or replication date and time functions. So I have date and time functions, and then current simulation time is t now, and I want to divide t now by 60 to get the hours, because t now is in minutes. So here I got my whole expression, and it's saved here, and so we're recording now into a set. And so now, right, we're recording this rejected calls into a set, and so you can see the changes, right? So before we had this counter name rejected calls, but now it's actually a counter set. So as you can see, in the statistic data module, we have these different periods. We don't have the counter statistic used. We using the period statistics was This will be the name that will appear in the project results, right, or report, project reports when we run the system. So the next thing I want to do is go ahead and do some back office research. So to do that, I will need to modify the tag calls part. So in terms of tech support calls, it remains the same through determine product type, decide module, but I will now also need to add assign modules for each of the product type right after that decide data module. And in assign, I want to be able to assign entity type to distinguish product type and reports, entity picture for animation, and attribute tech call type, and that's going to be either 1, 2, or 3 by product type, and that will help in routing. So let me go ahead and do that. And so this will also do some changes that we already did. So this just lists some of the changes that we already did, because when we introduce the set of resources, we actually introduce different products, and then in the process module, we made all those changes. And so this is just reviews of what we already did. So as you remember, we had the tech agent index also introduced there. So let's go ahead and look at this in Arena. So again, now what I'm doing is I'm going to modify this part that deals with tag calls. So now it just goes straight to release trunk line. But as we know, we need to make some changes. So I'm going to move these a little bit further, because I will also need some assigns, and so I'll have to disconnect them, maybe even a little further too, and then this one here. And so now I think I should have, especially if I move it a little more, I should probably have enough space for my, well, let's do just a little more to be safe. Well, now I should have enough space for my assigns. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete all of these connections so that I can introduce the assigns, and then I'll reconnect them again. So assign, as you remember, is in the basic process, and that's a flowchart module. So I'm gonna get some of the assigns added. So my first assign is well, connected me to the wrong one, so I'll just delete that. I want this assign to be for product type 1, and then I'm gonna connect it here to this product. And so let me go ahead and edit this assign. So I'm gonna double click to edit it in the dialog. And so this assign is gonna be named an entity, let's see, it's going to be named tech call 1 entity type, and then I'm going to have some assignments. So I'm going to go ahead and add entity type. So here I'm going to scroll down and select entity type. And then I'm going to type in, my entity type is going to be called tech call 1. And as soon as I finish that, you'll see that's what will appear here in among entities. So I have tech call 1. So let me demonstrate. And then we'll come back to editing this. So now if I click on this data module entity, you see now here I have tech call 1. And so let me go back and add here. So I can also add entity picture, and here I could do some changes. So I'll just rename this, and then later your task is gonna be to create the corresponding entity picture in your library, so that you can use for this model. So it's gonna be, my name is gonna be picture tech 1 product, or tech 1 whole, and then more importantly, I'm gonna add another attribute that will allow us, right, and that's the entity type and entity picture are both attributes, but now we can have our own attribute that we can create ourselves, and that's gonna be tag call type, and this my value is gonna be 1. And of course, instead of doing it this way, I could have done it differently, because this decide is basically using these percentages. I could have actually replaced this whole thing with another assign module where I could have an expression built where that would be discrete, assigning the attribute using this discrete distribution with 25, and then 25 plus 34 would be 59, and then 1. So let's though go ahead and copy this, because we're gonna have the other two also done in a similar way, and so I'm gonna paste it and then do some changes. And let me go ahead and connect it right away. This is gonna be my 2. And I also gonna paste it again. And as you can see, right, as soon as I'm doing all this pasting, it actually highlights here in the spreadsheet, or spreadsheet part. Spreadsheet view tells me that I will need to change the name for the module, but that's not the only thing I will need to change, of course. So now let me go ahead and edit these two that I just copied. So I'm gonna open this one, and so see, this is the one that I opened here. So it needs to be renamed in order to take care of this yellow here. And so I change it to tech 2, and I need to edit, very importantly, I need to edit the assignments. So I change the entity type to tech call 2, because that's going to be tech call 2. And then entity picture is going to be different for animation. Again, it's your task to create the picture as I showed you in the previous lecture, lecture 14, and then change this value for the tag call type to 2. And so now as soon as I did this, now this is fine, and now I need to change this one the same way. So I'm going to double click and edit this one. So I'm going to change it to tag call 3 entity type, and here I'm going to change this to tag call 3, and here I'm going to change the picture, which you will need to create on your own, and then of course importantly is the value of this attribute tag call type. So now that I did that, let me just show you that we have already done the changes for the processes. So as you remember, we already made the changes, so, and this is true for all of them. So we changed this to process product type 1 tag call, and so we have this resources as a set of resources. So you can see we actually have the set of resources, and using product 1 text, and then we're saving, very importantly, we're saving this attribute called tag agent index. So that's important because we're going to be using this. So now that's okay. And also you can see is a similar thing also for the second, also using the same tag agent index. It's important that we're using the same attribute here, so we can call it and determine which one it is. And then again, a similar way here, we're using set product 3 set of resources, and we're saving the attribute so we know which tag we're gonna later come back to. So now, right, before it just went straight to finish, right, with releasing the trunk line and so on. Well, now I have to make some changes, so I'll have to disconnect some of these. So I'm selecting the connection and deleting it for the type 2 product, type 1, and also type 3. And here I'm going to build my back office research information. So the first thing that I need to do is to check whether the back office research is needed. So that can be done using the decide module from the basic process panel. So I'm going to select this, and then that will automatically connect my decide to it. So here's my decide. And then I also need, because it doesn't connect the rest of them automatically, I also need to connect these to the decide. And then edit my decide. So I'm going to double click on it, get this, and then rename this decide into, let's say we're gonna have this named as back office research and return call question mark. And this is gonna be based on chance with 4% that will be true. They will need the back office research and return call, and the rest of them won't. So after when the back office research happens, and let me go ahead just and connect right away the false, because these don't need any kind of back office research. So instead they need to go here and release the trunk line, of course. And so now it's gonna go release the trunk line. And so let me just move it a little bit. So now you can see it more clearly that it goes to release trunk line. And the next thing I want to do is to take care of the back office research. So in the back office research, let me check what we're gonna do there to make sure that I'm following the model. So here's what we're gonna do, right? We already have done this decide module for back office research and return call. So the next thing we're gonna have release, right? So we need to release a trunk line, so we're going offline while the back office research is gonna go if we need to release a trunk line. And then we're gonna delay, and this is gonna be using blocks with storage and time of exponentially distributed 60 minutes for back office research. And then after that, we're gonna have the incrementation for the tech return work in process, because we want to know this type of statistic, and we're actually gonna be differentiating it by tech. So it's not really quite, we're not gonna be using a statistic here. We're actually gonna be using a variable, but that will allow us to track it on our own, and that's based on tag call type. And so we're going to introduce a one-dimensional variable array. We'll define it in variable data module, and also have the tag call type 1, 2, or 3 that assigned in the assign modules that we just did in those 3 assign modules. We're going to use that here as the index for our array. And we also will have a decide module to decide which product type we need to, right, because we need to return the call while the person is waiting, while back office research is done. We need to call back. So the callback is going to be based on the product type, and it's going to be the same person that will do that. So let me just go ahead and model some of it so you see what we're going to do. So we're back to Arena. So the next thing we're going to do when the tag call needs back office research is we need to release the calls trunk line, because it's not going to be used. Somebody will call you back. So to release it, we need to go to advanced process, and that's where release module is located. That's one of the flowchart modules, of course. And so we gonna release the trunk line. So let's connect it to the true, and then edit this release by double clicking, and then I'm gonna type in release trunk line, and we actually already had release trunk line, so I can't just name it like that, right? If I did, then this would be yellow, right, because we already have release trunk line here. So I need to type release trunk line for back office research, and then here I'm gonna show which resources I'm gonna release. So it's gonna be my resource, and then trunk line, a single trunk line is released, and we're good. And as you see, this is fine, but if I didn't have for back office research here, then it would not accept it. It would highlight it in yellow, right, both of these. So the next thing I want to do is to go to add the delay. So the delays that we're going to use are going to come from blocks panel. So here's the blocks panel already attached. But if you don't have it attached, you know that you can just go to template attach here, click on template attach, and then find the blocks.tpo, double click on it, or click on it and then do open, and that would attach it. But I already have it, so I don't need to do that. It's already here for me. So if you already have it, you don't need to do that. So the next thing I want to do is find the delay. So all of these modules in the blocks, they are already right there. They are listed in alphabetic order already. So now the next thing I'm going to do is click on this and then pull the delay from the blocks and attach it to the release. And here I'm gonna go in and change the delay. So the what I'm gonna type in here is gonna be the duration, of course, is gonna be exponential, which I can do by building the expression. So right click and then find the random distributions, and then find the exponential and change the mean here to 60 minutes. So it's going to be exponential with 60 minutes. And then important things that I want to do is I want to add the storage ID. So here, these are the IDs that I do have, but I need a different storage ID because it's going to be for back office research. So let me call this as so it's gonna be, my storage ID is gonna be back office research storage. And before I finish this, let me also label this as office or offline back office research. And so now I got that done, right? So you can see there's a storage ID, back office research storage. I can go ahead and copy this, and I'll show you why, right? Because this is just a blocks, right? This is only blocks. It does not automatically create storages. So who remembers where the storages are located? Oh, good. It is an advanced process. So you remember storage is a data module in advanced process. So you can see there's no back office research storage created, right? We have these three storages, but no back office research. And that is because, right, we didn't use the delay from advanced process, but instead we use the blocks, which is more elementary. And so we need to create the storage ourselves, so we can just go ahead and paste this. And so I just pasted back office research storage. And now this is going to be fine, but if I forgot to do that, then it would generate an error for me when I would run my model. So now I'm not going to run the model because I haven't finished it yet. So we have the delay, right? And then that delay, I'm using back office research storage, which I defined here in my storage data module. So the next thing I want to do after that is, of course, increment the tag return work in process. So that can be done using the assign module from the basic process. So I'm going to select delay and then click on my assign, pull it down here. That connects my assign, so I'm going to double click on it and edit it. So I'm going to rename it into increment the tag return work in process. And so here I'm also gonna either click add or double click and then select instead of variable 1 array 1 dimensional. And so by doing that, that will create a variable array, and I want to rename it into, well, let's say tag return work in process, or WIP. And so the row will depend, of course, on the tag call type. So I'm going to change this by building the expression. I can, right, instead of typing it in, I could make a typo when I type tag call type. So instead, I'm going and use an expression builder, and then under basic process variables, I click on attribute and then value, and then select the tag call type attribute, right? So from this pull down menu, scroll down menu, we have tag call type, and then I press OK. So now my row is tag call type, and here it's going to be new value. So I can build an expression here as well. So build an expression, and so because I'm going to increment, so I'm going to be adding 1. But what am I incrementing? I'm incrementing this tag return work in process, which is an attribute, right? But the thing is, well, not very attribute, sorry, the variable, the variable array. So the problem though is I have not defined this variable array yet, so I'm just gonna leave it as 1 and then come back and do the expression in a second. So now let me demonstrate, right, that here I have now a variable which says tag return work in process. Before I didn't have any variables because, as you remember, I deleted all the previous variables that we had for model 5.1. And so now that I have this variable, I should actually go back and be able to edit this, right? So let me edit this. I can either double click or press edit, and so it comes back here, right? If I just left it as 1, it would always be 1. That's not what we want because we want to track it. So I'm going to build the expression, and before I couldn't really see the expressions before, right, in my variables before, but now I should be able to find the variable. So I'm going to have plus, And then in the basic process variables, I have my variable, right, that I didn't see before, right? So now here's my variable, and I can say current value, and then here's my tech return work in process. Well, let me change it slightly so I have plus, but it's an array. So I also need to have the index, right, to know which out of the whole array, which value to select. Those values are indexed by this attribute that we have, right? So now I can scroll up again under basic process variables. I have attribute and then value, and here the first attribute is sales call priority. That's not the one I want to use. I want to use tech call type, so I click here to get the drop down menu, and now select tech call type. And so that builds my whole expression for me. So you see here, I'm done building this expression, and so that's what we have here, tech return work in process. In the row tech call type, +1, right? That's how it's going to increment this tech return work in process. So now we corrected it, this is okay. And so if you're done here with this, so the next thing I want to do is I want to determine which product type it is, right? Because based on which product type, I need to select a tech person from that, or seize the tech person for that specific product type. So again, the way to go is to use the decide. So I'm going to click here in the basic process, pick the decide, and then this will automatically connect my decide to the increment tech return work in process, and then I double click to edit it, and so I'm going to rename it as product type ? And here by default it selects two-way by chance, but that's incorrect because I want to know which exact product type. So it's not by chance, it should be by condition. And also I have 3 products, so the two-way by condition doesn't work. I need 3 different conditions. So I have n-way by condition. And so conditions that I'm using is actually only 2 because everything else is just gonna go here from false. So I'm gonna add 2 conditions. And so here I'm gonna base it on what type I have. So I'm gonna use entity type, right? So I could say entity type, and then I could build an expression. So either way would work. So let me show you how I can build the expression. So if I had the expression, I can build the expression, and so I could go to let's say entity related variables, attribute, entity type. So that demonstrates very nicely. We haven't used this entity related variables yet. So entity related variables, attributes, then entity type gives me entity.type. And then when it equals to the specific type, right? So which specific type we want to select, we click on basic process, and then we have the entity. Let's see, that's the times. So let's check, maybe we have we don't really have the tag call 1. That's what I want to use here. So that's another thing that we could do, right, is copy the tag call 1. So we need to make sure, of course, right, that that's exactly the entity type that we're using. So let me come back to it, right? So if you're not sure, you can go here and just copy by selecting the whole thing and then copying it by Ctrl-N, for example, and then we can go back to product type, right? Edit it and, paste it again. So the next thing is, again, we can either do entity type and then select, say, tag call 2, right? And that would also work, right? So either one of those they're the same. So now, right, like instead of this, I could have just put expression and then entity.type equals to tag call 2. That's an alternative. So I actually don't need this OR condition because the only other option for us is that it's a tag call 3. So now I have this entity types, right? And again, right, if I wanted to have it all similar, right, I could also, right, so you can see here, especially if I increase my zoom, it also tells me, right, of what kind of, right, expression I have here. Let's maybe increase it even more so you guys can really see that, right? It tells me, right, of what we have, right? So that actually corresponds to these two expressions. So you can see it's basically the same, even though I did it two different ways. So now let me press M, and that will reduce it back to my previous zoom. And so the next thing I want to do is I want to seize the appropriate agent. So I'm going to use the seize module from advanced process. And so here's my seize. So I'm going to add seize. And again, it connected right away to this one. But I actually want to just start building with this, right, for the first one. So let's say I'm just moving things around without changing much. And so the next thing would be seize. And so the next would be seize, and I'm gonna modify the seize here in a second. So I double click on it, and I'm gonna rename it as seize tag agent type 1. Still will have allocation, but as you remember, we need to seize this agent with a higher priority. So before we had medium priority almost everywhere, now we're gonna use priority high, and then here we're gonna double click on resource, and it's gonna be, again, we're gonna select it from the specific from the product 1, right? Because the tag from product 1 is needed. So we're gonna base it on set, and then we have product 1 and quantity 1, and the selection rule is very importantly will be specific member. And specific member means that we want a specific agent from this product 1 set of resources. And so here my set index, and again, right, I could just scroll and choose, right, is going to be tag agent index, right, because that's a person for that specific entity, right? This attribute tag agent index is what the person who helped the person before, right? So we now got this, and so this is good. And so the next thing we want to do is we want to say OK and do the process, right? We're gonna add the process because as soon as we got the agent then requests the trunk line. So, and then not only it requires the trunk line, but there's also the time, right? So there's return tag time. Let's introduce a very actually expression. So as you know, expressions are an advanced process. So we can introduce an expression here. We already had tag time. Now we can just say, we can't say tag time, but we can say return tag time. Oops. Return tag time, and so return tag time is fine. And here, let's go ahead and edit it. So the tag time was 3618, but triangular is 3618. We need to change the parameters to 2, 4, and 9, because that's what we have for return time conversation with the tag person. And so now that we introduce this return tag time, the next thing to do is to go to basic process and introduce a process. So we're going to have process here to deal with the first. And I'm going to double click on it and I'm going to type in the name for the process. It's going to be return call type 1. So here it's going to be seize delay release, and the priority is going to be higher, so it's going to be high. Right before we had priority medium when we selected the trunk line. Now we're gonna select the trunk line here. So the tag 1, we already see the tag 1. Now it's tag 1 requires the trunk line. So we're going to choose trunk line here. And we say OK. And then instead of delay type being triangular, that's what we have by default, we're going to use expression instead. We're going to change units to minutes. And then we could actually click here, right? Or actually, instead of clicking here, let's just build the expression. So we're gonna go here, we introduce the variables. So variables are under basic process, right? In basic process panel, we have this variable. So we're gonna click on basic process variables, then click on variable, then current actually, I apologize. We introduced this through expression, which is in advanced process variables. So we click on advanced process, and then expression, and then value, and here's my return tag time right away, right? If I didn't see it, I could scroll it and find it, right? But now that we define it, we have return tag time, so we're gonna have this here, and then say OK. And so this is gonna be my return call type for type 1. And so you can see, right, this is just seizing the trunk line. And so the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna have the release, because after we're done with this return call talk, then we can release the agent. So the release module is an advanced process. So I'm gonna scroll up to find the release, and that's the data module here. So this is gonna be connected to my return call. And I'm going to double click and change the name to release tag agent type 1, and then go to resources, change from resources to a set, because we seized an agent from the set for product 1, and it's going to be 1. And here, instead of this, which is by default, we need specific member. And instead of set indexer, I could either click build expression and then find the attribute value and then tag call type, right? Because it gives me a specific, oh sorry, not tag call type, tag agent index, right? So it's the same way I could do that through building expression, right? Again, attribute, value, and here tag agent index. right? Or as I did before, right? It's actually here under the additional attributes that we defined. There is tag agent index. So it's the same person, right, that served as before, that we seized again, and now we're releasing it. Okay, and so now what I want to do is I want to also have the similar things done for the other, right? So for the other, I also want to do the same. Oops. And so I'm going to copy all of this by selecting all three of them. So I select this by clicking on it, then I do Control, press the Control button, and without releasing the Control button, I'm selecting the rest of them. And so now I selected all of them, and then I'm going to click on it and do copy, right? So it's a right click and then copy, and then I'm going to paste. So I'm going to paste this, and again, right, I will need to do some of the changes because I cannot have the same names, right? And then do one more for the other product. Product 3 seems to be too crowded, but I'll have them moved a little bit. So now, right, that I did that, let me go ahead and remember to connect everything. So I'm going to connect this here, and then, of course, here, and here, and also from this to this, and then again press connect, and go connect here. Press connect here and connect here. So it's important to connect from here to here and not the other way around, because that would not be correct. So again, right, that we do that, after we do that, so it's not as crowded. I'm just changing it a little bit so it's not as crowded. And then, of course, you know, I can move these around a little. Next thing, important things that I need to do is change the C's. So it's going to be C's for type 2. And very importantly, I need to change it here, right? So this is important. So I'm going to change it here, and this changes right away. So I don't need to change that, but I'm going to double click on this to edit it. And this is going to be from product 2, but the rest remains the same. So it's a set. Now it's for product 2, specific member, tag agent index. And so this is edited correctly. So now you can see this is fine. And then we do the same for 3. So I'm going to change this because we need to change the name. We need to have unique names. And very importantly, I'm going to edit this resource assignment. So I'm going to click edit. That's just an alternative way to do it. And then select product 3 here. And the rest remains the same. And then this automatically, you see, changes as soon as I rename this. So now that's okay. And then I do the same for processes. So here now you see the processes are all highlighted. So if I forgot to change it, it would not be correct. So I need to change this to 2. And still remains the same in terms of trunk line, and return tag time remains the same. So then I also rename this into type 3. The rest remains the same. And then here for release, right, I'm going to change the release as well. See, when I click, you see that these are all non-unique. So I need to make unique names, so 2. And very importantly, I need to make release correct product, because if I didn't, that would be a big problem in terms of the model validity, right? It wouldn't be correct model, or we wouldn't build the correct model, so we need to check the correctness. So you can see here, right, this should release product 2. The rest remains the same. Now, similarly here, I'm going to change this to 2. And very importantly, oh, sorry, not to 2, to 3. Because this is now for 3. And then added this to select product 3. And the rest remains the same, right? So the set name is changed to product 3. So now we do OK, and we're done with all of these now. So they're all fine. You see there's no more yellow, and we took care of all of this. So the next thing I want to do is now decrement the tech return work in process, which is very similar to this increment, right? So when we're incrementing, we're doing some tech work in process, but now that we are done and we released them, we need to right away decrement it. So let me go ahead, select it and copy, and then paste here. Maybe move just a little bit, and then I'm gonna, and see right now, because I copied it, it's of course incorrect, I need to change it, but I want to go and right ahead connect it to the proper modules. So right after all of them, I'm gonna go and do this decrement work in process, and afterwards, see, this already seized and released the trunk line in this process. So now all we need to do is just go and record complete calls. If I didn't, right, if I did it a little differently, so maybe let's try to move it. So now you can see where it goes, right? So you can see where the connection goes very easily. If I connected here to release trunk line, that would not be correct, because here it already seizes, delays, and releases the trunk line. And previously, we released the trunk line. So we definitely don't need to release it again, because that would not, that would make the model incorrect if we try to release another trunk line here. But before I forgot, let's go ahead and decrement it, because now you see we have two the same, and they actually serve two different purposes. The first one was just like this, where we incrementing it, and here we had incremented, right? So now I need to change this to decremented. Decrementing means decreasing it by 1, so I can just replace this plus with minus, right? Or through expression builder, I could just select the plus and press the minus. Well, it doesn't want to delete it, so let me delete it anyways. So either way, right, we need to make sure that we're subtracting, right? So I can either change it to minus through the expression or just press the minus. So again, it's still the same tech return work in process, but now we decremented it. And because we're decrementing it, we also need to change the name, but also the name must be unique. So we now decrement tech return work in process, and when I press OK, this yellow is gonna disappear because we changed it to decrement. And very importantly, we changed the assignment to have -1, while here it was +1. So now we're basically done with this model, and we can go ahead and run it. So press go. Oh, and we forgot something. A linker error detected the following block in our assign. We have tech return work in process, and then invalid variable or attribute dimension. Oh, okay. So what we need to do is make a quick change here. So to fix this error, let's go back and check this variable. So we're gonna take a look at the tech return work in process variable. So the variables are in the basic process. So we created that that variable automatically in this assign module. And what I forgot to do is I forgot to change the rows here, right? So if you look at this, it just shows as a real value, right? So this would be just a single value was, the default value of 0 or no initial values. So what I really need to do is I need to have this as a one-dimensional array with 3 rows, and each row value corresponds to the different product. So now, right, I can also add initial values. So either going here and adding initial values, or I could go through this, and here's my initial values. So by default, they're basically 0, 0, 0. So I can just leave it as is. And so now it should run without any problems unless we have some other errors. So now another thing, resource tag has been animated without being defined in resources element. So let's go ahead and double check that. So as you can see, if I press next, it also tells me about resource tag 2, and again next resource tag 3. So what happened, again, right, we can find it, but what happened is basically here we had our animation, and we had these tag resources that we deleted. We renamed them and changed them into other type of resources, and they're still animated here, right? For example, this one, when I double click, this says tag 3. Right, so I need to change these by changing the animation. So I can pull this one out, for example, and just delete them for now. And again, delete, and then click on all of this and delete, and click on all of this and delete. So what I will need to do is also do a few changes. So again, this is also my variables, and these are variables which are process product type 1, tag call, work in process. But if I wanted to introduce some animation for my resources, so let's move it here, and this one as well. So if I wanted to, say, use my animate transfer toolbar, I could animate the storage, but in the animate toolbar I also have the resource animation. So in the animate toolbar I would need to use a different type of resources to find, right, for each of those, right, 11 tags that I introduced instead of, right, I would need to have the resources defined. And so I could have, right, so I would start one by one with, say, Aiden, and then have the C's area and so on, right? I could do all of that. I could also replace and change it, and then place it there, right? So I would place somewhere the resources, right? And so that would be my Aiden resource, but I also would need to do all of this multiple times, right? So then Anna, and then place Anna somewhere, and so on, right? So for all of them, so for now I'm just going to delete these. I'm just demonstrating you that I could do that. So again, with Anna I forgot to do the C's area, so I would do all the C's areas, and so we'll have some interlapping sets for different products. So I refer you to the book example, but that's what we would need to do. We would need to introduce 11, right? And so far I only did 2, but we would need all 11 of them here and animate those, and then of course, do the routing this way. So for now, I'm just going to delete some of this. Oh, sorry, delete of them, and run it without this animation. So getting rid of some of that animation should take care of this. So you can see I changed my animation, but I also want you to do the rest of animation on your own. So let's go ahead and run it. So now you can see it runs fine. We can see this being ran fine. So we can finish it by fast forwarding. So the simulation has run to completion, and we can look at the results. So now in our model, this is our category overview report. We also have some of the user-defined information. And so now we have all of these period 1, 2, 3 through 10 rejected calls. And so you can notice, right, during period 5, 6, 7, and 8, we have more than during the other ones, especially during period 5 and 8, we have very high number of rejected calls, but from 5 to 8, we have a lot of rejected calls, and also a little bit during period 9. So possibly need some additional resources there if we think about how to improve our model. And in terms of the entity, you can also see that now we have tech call 1, 2, and 3 with a number in and also number out, or work in process here, right? So here number out. So all of these were introduced, right? Some new things that we introduced here. So let me go ahead and finish on this. And so if you wanted to return to the model, I would just close the report here. And then if I wanted to rerun it or just come back to the model, I again just press stop this simulation run, and I'm back to this. So now, as I said, let's go ahead and finish. So to finish, let's review what we need to do. So we already had in the statistic data module, we already had defined 10 counter-type statistics. Now we need to also introduce 4 time-persistent statistics in order to track expressions, in order to be able to finish this model. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use back-office research work in process to track total number of cases in research. And this can be done by monitoring the storage, number in storage, in the back-office research storage. So we're going to use the number in storage, which is this NSTO function. And we also will add 3 additional time-persistent statistics for different techs. So for tech 1, we'll have tech 1 total online work in process statistics, and the same for tech 2 and tech 3. And we'll be tracking the number of that product type in back office using expression. And we're going to introduce an expression that uses tech 1 total online work in process. And so this type of expression is going to be defined by adding the process product type 1 tech call, which is right the before back office, that's our regular process, and then plus the back office, right? And the back office, we introduce this tech return work in process variable, right? That's a variable array, one-dimensional array that we just changed a second ago, right? Where I actually changed it to have 3 rows. So for each different type, we're gonna add whatever is done before the back office, and then the back office work in process. So to finish, let me go ahead and implement all of this in Arena. So here in Arena, I'm gonna go ahead and go to the statistics module, which is found in advanced process. I'm clicking on advanced process panel and then scroll down to find the data module called statistic. And then here, as you see, right, we already have these 10 counts or 10 counter statistics. And now we'll introduce additionally four more statistics. So let me just pull it just a little up here, and then now I'm gonna double click to add more. So this is gonna be a time-persistent statistic, and that requires an expression, and I'm gonna rename the statistic into back office research work in process. And so you can see this is the name of it. It's going to be time-persistent statistic, so I need an expression here. And so notice, right, it also created this automatically this report label for it. So now to build the expression, I'm going to click here, right? So again, I'm just right-clicking and then build expression. And then I'm going to find the storage. So storage is introduced through advanced process. So I'm going to close up the basic process. And here under advanced process, we have storage. And then number in storage, which is NSTO, right? So NSTO function, number in storage. And then we want back office research storage. So, right, luckily, it's the first and alphabetically listed storages, 4 storages that we have, but if it wasn't, we just scroll down in this scroll down menu and select back office research storage. So now we got this expression here so that you can see. And so that takes care of that. And we need 3 more statistics, which is again time-persistent statistics that we introduced. And these are going to be the statistics for the Tech 1 to track Tech 1 total online work in process, and also for Tech 2 and 3. So I'm going to put Tech 1 total online work in process statistic. And again, I will need an expression here, but I haven't defined an expression for the Tech 1 total online work in process, so I'm gonna come back here to introduce the expression, right, because that's highlighted in yellow. But for now, I'm gonna, from the statistic data module, I'm gonna move to expression data module, select the expression data module, and add the additional expressions. So here is gonna be my Tech 1 total online work in process. And so here I will need to define the variable, the expression value. And so I'm gonna go in here, and actually through this, right? Through this I cannot pick the expression builder or use the expression builder. So I'm gonna edit it via dialog. I can either right-click here and say click edit via dialog, or I can just double-click, and it also pops the dialog up here, and this is where I can actually add expression values. So I can press add here, and then this expression values menu or box comes where I can actually right click and then build expression, and then build the expression by finding the process first, and the process is under basic process variable, and then process, and then number in process. And right away, right, it selected process product type 1, but if I didn't, I can scroll down and find it, but I already did for me, which is gray, work in process. So again, basic process variables, process, number in process, And then for process name, we select product type 1 to call dot work in process, or what WIP. So, well, that's not the only thing. I almost forgot. We also have back office research, so we need to add another thing to it. So we're adding this additional part, which is introduced through variable. So variable is also under basic process variables, and then variable. And then we can choose the current value. So we have tech return work in process, but that's an array. So we actually need to also index it by, and because this is the first one, right, for the first type 1, right, or a first product, we need to choose row 1. So we selected 1 here. So now I can just say okay, okay here, okay this, and then I need 2 more for tech 2 and for tech 3. So I'm gonna right away add those, and then added them, right? So not only do I need to change the name here, typing tag 2 so it's unique, but I also need to go in here and change this expression value. So this is gonna be 2, and this is gonna be 2. And so now that's okay. And if I wasn't really sure, then I again could have just double click here and build the expression, right? So I could have instead just build the expression, selecting here the process. So replacing this was process number in, and then scrolling to type 2. So that's an alternative. And then again, right, this is just the same. All I did is change the 2 here. So that's okay. And now this is not highlighted anymore, but we still need to change the 3. And importantly, added the expression, because that's the most important too, or equally important too. So I'm going to double click to edit it, and I can either go through build expression and then make changes to 3, and here I could do it through basic process, and then process, number in process, and then select 3. Or I could have just, if I were careful, I could have just changed the 1 to 3, just making sure that I don't create any typos. So now I'm saying okay, then I'm good here with my expressions. So because I created all those 3 expressions, now I can use it in my statistic data module. So I'm going back and gonna add the expression. So I'm gonna select, right click, and then do build expression. And here it's gonna be in expressions, and expressions are in advanced process variables. So I'm gonna close the basic process, go open my advanced process variables, and here I have expression. So I have value, and then I can choose this tech 1 to the online work in process. So that's gonna be what I have here. And so that takes care, right, of the first tech work in process. But I also need the same for tech 2. And well, let's just move it a little more to make it easier for me. Oh, it doesn't want to scroll down, huh? So now it will. Let's do time-persistent. So I'm just going to copy it, paste this, change this to 2, and then add it through building the expression. And then here I'm going to have expressions under the advanced process variables, and then value, and I'll choose tech 2 online work in process that I just defined. And next we're gonna do tech 3. So again, I copied it, so I'm just pasting this. So I have tech 3 to the online working process. That's gonna be time-persistent statistic. So make sure that you understand the difference between the different type of statistics, right? So we already talked about tally and output and counter and frequency, and finally now we're also talking about time-persistent statistic. But we have talked about time-persistent statistics before too. So by now you should be able to distinguish between them. If you don't, check the book as well. So now we have value, and then here finally tech 3 total online working process. So we got all of this done, and we're gonna collect it through the entire period, and here's our report labels. So now that we're good on this, now that we're good on this, we're almost done. So you can see, right, again, we can run this, or just fast forward it, or we could have clicked here and do the fast forward through this. So now we want to see the results. And so if you look at this, right, again, we have some user-specified not only counter, but also time-persistent statistics. And so it actually computed the working process for us, the tech 1 working process, and tech 2, right, and tech 3. So all of it, right, are the additional things that we just introduced. So now let's go ahead and discuss this. So I'm gonna finish the run and discuss the results real quick again. But before I do that, I also want to discuss animation real quick. So I'm not gonna do the animation, but I would like to remind you to do the animation yourself, because it's quite similar to what we discussed in lecture 14. So again, right, we needed to delete those tags, tag 1, 2, and 3, which I already did. And so the next thing is to add the additional things. We also want to change the variables in the 3 tech support working process, right, to track the total number of tech support calls. And so please do it on your own, but that's easy. You just double click on variables and then edit them. And then the next thing is the new back office storage animation. Because we had additional storage introduced, we would need the animation storage, and that's an advanced transfer. As you know from lecture 14, you can add additional variable animation for the number present, new queue for each tech support product type. We actually have it, we just need to move it to the animation pane, all of those additional queues. And we also need to add a resource animation for each individual tech support person, and then group them by product type and color them for capabilities to say, right, which capability each resource has. So all of it I leave as a homework for you. You can look up model 5.2 from the book too to see how it's done there. So we're not going to do it for this model. And let's discuss the results now. So as you saw before, most rejected calls fall in hours 5 and 8. In hour 9, we only had 2 rejected calls. So maybe if we do some adjustments to increase staff during that time between 5 and 8, we're actually gonna reduce the number of rejected calls. So that's another thing to look at in terms of improving our model, or improving our system actually. And so you're gonna continue doing these things that you started in another lab, and so in a new lab you'll be modifying your ALF-PC problem. And so again, you'll be using some of those things that we introduced in lecture 15, both parts A and B. Thank you.